You're a doctor and
Yes.
you're an author. So professionally speaking, how do you feel that will translate if elected to the State House? State Senate, rather, sorry.
That's correct. Well, you know, as we were talking about before the segment began, healthcare is the issue of the day, bar none. There are lots of important issues in this state, but healthcare is the top issue in our state and nationally. Regrettably, we only have one physician serving in our state legislature right now, and I intend to increase that by at least one more. We need a stronger voice of healthcare in our legislature to help sort out some of the problems that we're dealing with these days. Healthcare is a complex issue, and it's not something that is easily handled unless you have a strong background in medicine to make those decisions.
In terms of healthcare, Governor Deal made the decision not to include Medicaid expansion in his budget this year. How did you feel about that choice? And do you feel Medicaid should have been expanded in our state?
Well, I think that choice was the proper choice that Governor Deal made, and here's why. I'm in healthcare every day. I see it every day. There is a fallacy, a misunderstanding that the general public has, or some in the general public, I should say, that if we don't expand Medicaid, excuse me, that people will just be left completely without health care. They'll be dying in the streets, et cetera, et cetera. That's completely not the case. People come to the emergency room, they're taken care of regardless of if they have insurance coverage or not. So that's really not an issue. The problem that I have with the way Medicaid is running now is that it's very inefficient and is being abused at a rate that is truly astounding. And my perspective is that before we spend more money on a broken system, we need to reform the system and fix it, and then we can use those resources more equitably and more efficiently.
Speaking of reform, what specifically do you feel you could bring to the table in terms of that? How would you reform the system?
Practical experience, and there's no getting around that. Simple, practical experience. I see people come into the emergency room with complaints that literally, you know, shouldn't be dealt with in the emergency room. There's some public education that can go on to help redivert those patients, or divert those patients to other sources of care. That would be a tremendous savings. There's just we could literally talk for hours about the problems that I see on a daily basis. And again, the important thing, the take-home message, is that only somebody with that kind of experience in the healthcare field can really give the perspective that's necessary to correct the program.
Let's switch gears for a second and go back to your race in 2012. You
Sure.
lost by just a few hundred votes.
That's right.
What prompted that run again this year?
Well, you know, the interesting thing about the race last year was I was new to the process, and I started out basically as a campaign of one. I had some help from some dear friends and supporters toward the end, but for the majority of that race, it was just me. And we came awfully close when no one really gave us much of a chance. My opponent outspent me almost 10-1 in most spending categories. And we came awfully close. We proved that money is not everything in politics, and that hard work and a good message is very important. We came so close that I decided that we need to run again. I still believe the same things that I believed last time. I want to serve in our legislature and help sort out some of these problems that we're dealing with, particularly health care issues. And this time it's nice because I actually started out with an army of supporters, so having some help is fantastic. So.
Going back again to that campaign back in 2012, there was a lot of issues. Your opponent brought up, Senator Staten, about your finances.
That's correct.
There were lawsuits filed against you. You were in debt at that time. Has your debt been rectified? What's your current financial status at this point?
Well, the situation was in 2002, I lost a child. My son died as a result of a heart condition, and the IRS denied our tax credit request for a child tax credit because our son didn't live for the entire year, if you can imagine that. That started a dispute with the IRS that continued for many years. Unbeknownst to me, when I would pay my taxes, the IRS were holding them in escrow while we were sorting out the original issue in 2002, and so that led to some difficulties, which we have long since sorted all those out. In 2005, I had a service cancelable loan contract agreement with the Medical Center of Central Georgia, and to be paid out over 36 months of continued service in an underserved area of our state. At 8 months into the program, I was activated to go overseas to Iraq, so I had to leave the state and leave the country and serve in the military, and that caused a breach of our agreement, which I offered to settle when I returned. The medical center rejected the offer, or I should say their attorneys rejected the offer, and the issue was not the repayment of the loan balance that was owed. The issue was significant fees and interest and other penalties that they were attaching on top of that. That's what the argument has been. The loan was actually paid off in 2010.
Okay.
We just recently, about a month and a half ago, settled it outright. And so, although the Macon Telegraph was incorrect in their recent reporting in their endorsement of my opponent, that issue has been settled as well.
So you're currently up to speed with all your debt. You're good.
That's correct. In fact, it wasn't really a debt situation. It was a dispute over interest, penalties, and fees. And the medical center actually realized they had made or their attorneys had incorrectly calculated the interest. When our attorney showed them the mistake, they realized their mistake. They settled the suit, and it's over and done with. And we actually got money back. They had overcharged us.
Do you feel like, you know, the voters are going to take that, I'm sure they're going to take that into consideration. What do you want to say to them about, you know, handling personal finances at the state level now? You know, there's a lot of money that goes through the Capitol that you've got to be responsible for. So why should they trust you with their money?
There's absolutely no correlation between the two of them. I put on a uniform and left the country to serve our nation. Uncle Sam called me to do it. I didn't have a choice. I was happy to do it because I've been in the military for 20 years, and I believe in our country and serving our country. The problem is that the Medical Center of Central Georgia and the attorneys didn't make accommodations for my service, and that's what's regrettable about it. I made an offer to settle things when I first got back. The issue was they wanted interest and penalties and fees. That was what I was fighting against because it was simply unfair. Who sues a soldier who puts on a uniform and goes overseas? That caused a lot of negative publicity for that organization, which was completely unnecessary. So.
Getting back to now, your district, you cover Upson, you cover Monroe, Peach, Crawford, you mentioned part of Centerville, that weird little part of Houston County, and parts of Bibb County. So this area is very diverse. You know, if you had to pick a greatest need for the area, what would it be, and how would you address it aside from health care? Because we touched on that earlier.
Well, again, health care is the most important issue, without a doubt. I think local control of our educational system is vital for our educators to be able to unleash their talents and educate children, which is what they're trained to do and is what they're dedicated to doing. That's what they've chosen to spend their life doing. We have veterans issues. There's a huge veterans base in this area, and we have issues there that only a veteran can really truly be sensitive to and address. And we need to protect and defend and fight for Robins Air Force Base. You know, I'm, as I said, a 20-year veteran. I'm a military flight surgeon. I've flown in and out of the base before on missions. I've worked there before. I understand the base. I understand its role in our national security structure. And I can advocate for the base as no one else really can without that experience.
And you mentioned education in there. Now, this year there was a big talk about getting rid of the Common Core throughout the state. What are your thoughts on that? It's been a very back and forth issue between Republicans, Democrats, all over the place.
Well, you know, the way I feel about that is we don't need Common Core, we need common sense. I have faith in our educators. They're bright people. They've dedicated their lives to educating our children. As I said, that's our most important social responsibility, is educating our children for the future. Common Core is a federal program that's handed down from on high. I don't think we need it. I don't think we need to tell our educators how to teach children how to add 2 + 2. They know what they're doing, and we just need to remove those federal mandates and regulations and let them sort things out, our educators, compare notes, compare best processes and procedures, and in the end, I think 2 heads are better than 1. The more feedback that we get from our educators, the better our educational system will be overall. We don't need the federal government to tell us how to teach our children.
Now, I know several people have argued that the Common Core does help with military families, keeping it consistent across states for kids who are moving around. You know, do you feel like that's anything to take into consideration?
I think that's an argument that holds no weight at all. You know, those essentially, you know, children learn essentially the same things in 1st grade. They learn the same things in 2nd grade. It's not that much different. And so I think that argument is simply a weak argument that supporters of Common Core make, but it, again, in my opinion, it doesn't hold water.
And one last issue for you, HB 60. Gosh, some people are calling it the most extreme gun bill in the U.S. Thoughts on it? Would you have changed it at all? Do you support it fully? What are your thoughts? Would you have voted for it?
Well, here's the thing. You know, I'm a defender of our Second Amendment. I'm a strict constitutionalist. I believe the Constitution serves a purpose, and if we have problems, then we need to amend it through the amendment process. The Constitution guarantees our right to protect ourselves through gun ownership. What a lot of people who oppose gun rights think that people who support gun rights want is for everybody to walk around with a gun on their side and you know, a gun in their back window of their truck. That's not what gun rights supporters want at all. They just want individuals to be able to make that choice, and they want individual institutions to be able to make the choice themselves whether or not they want to allow weapons in there. We don't, again, we don't need the federal government telling us, you know, who can carry a weapon and who can't, and in what facility they can take it and what facility they can't. I've been in the military for 20 years, but every time I go to my weekend National Guard drill, I have to leave my pistol at home, which I carry for personal safety, because I can't take it on a federal installation. That's simply absurd.
So do you support it then?
I support, you know, continued gun rights and individual decisions whether or not to carry weapons, and an individual institution's ability to make that decision whether they want their guns on their premises or not. That's what I believe.
If you were elected, would you consider, you know, maybe repealing that act or that law, or changing it a little bit?
Well, you know, as long as I would look at any legislation related to gun rights in terms of a couple of things. Number one, an individual's right to carry, and individual organizations' right to decide whether they want guns on the premises, as I mentioned a couple times already, and the collection of information. Why is the government collecting all this information, and what exactly are they going to do with it? If I'm comfortable that those three caveats are not being abused by the government, then you know, I would move forward with legislation to support gun rights.